All right.
Recording in
Okay.
progress.
Yeah,
She
now I
sounds the
get a
same here in
warning.
Sweden as she
Yeah.
does at home.
I think it's the same lady. She's everywhere.
Yes, she did.
All right. So
So
I will keep connected.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the other room and do the same.
okay.
Hello.
Hello. I am Laura Lennertz. Good to meet you.
I'm both going. I'm just doing technical.
This is all set
Yep.
up. The record is on. The recording is on. And yeah, that's.
So I'll
Yeah.
do the charts.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Will you be using Bento or something again?
I wasn't thinking.
Okay, so then all questions.
So
are in the
all
chat,
questions
and
would
I
be-
will
okay,
place them to
okay.
the presentation on.
Okay.
Well, how do you want to do it? You want to have questions or do it?
If we have, if the time looks like we can do that.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
that would be the
So
plan
I
to
will
do
raise
that.
my hand. Your question.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Great.
And I think,
So I don't have to do that.
No.
Great.
yay. And we'll get the microphone from that gentleman over there. Okay.
Don't know.
Yes, I
Did
do.
you?
Would you
Yeah.
like to stick back? Thank you. You're welcome. So.
Do you have now all presentations from
I'm
the
missing one.
local people at least?
Yes. Oops, I cannot. minimize. Okay,
Yeah,
I got it.
you can.
Yeah.
But you can click on
I can
desktop
close it
to
now to get to it.
Yeah.
Let's see, we've got. It is. We got just the PowerPoint front. We have. That. Okay, I am missing. Am I missing?
So from the.
Mhm. I can go ahead and.
Yeah, and then you make sure that it's all the speaker.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There, because we don't want the participants to be.
Right.
You can also.
So I want to go take away the participants.
Yeah.
But first I want to see where everybody's presentations are, because I'm having some
We
problems.
have a few minutes to go.
Right. So.
Why I am the speaker, I'm not speaking and I'm mute.
So I have your presentation on here. Could you pull it to the tray, please?
I hide it in the folder.
You put it in a folder.
Yes, I'm sorry. I've already admitted
That's
that I'm
too organized.
yeah, I'm too German. I'm very
Aren't
sorry
you
about
though?
that.
That's
I
okay.
even give it a name. That's where it is.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
but
gonna go ahead and pull it.
But now
into-
you can screw it up.
I can screw it up. Well, thank you. And I
Just
will.
prepared it to you.
I'm so glad that you're giving me that permission.
Are we going? Are we going? PowerPoint?
I'm going with PowerPoint.
I was going to share PowerPoint.
Okay, good. That way. we
Can
don't
you
have
just
to-
quickly start the full screen presentation mode? Because usually,
I don't want to do that. Where's
yeah.
slideshow? Ah, it's very, oh, that's because that's presenter's view.
because it's the idea that the people see the presentation only
Right.
in this small.
The
small-
people,
This is now the camera.
that's the camera doing that, but then the people at home should be able to
No,
see.
I am at home.
You are at home?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, let's
Um,
see. But it's because we didn't share it here. I'd have to share it here. So what I'll do
Yeah.
is I will go share his. Share. And I
Ah.
have this.
Yes. So that was the exercise. Right, now I'm having. Yeah. As a
Okay.
speaker, I'm having the camera like that, yes.
Right,
And I see the presentation.
so he would go
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
let's see, And he then
Sounds
go
good.
into it to use it. That's the screen, but how does he get into to use his own?
Yeah, it is, I think,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Mhm. I
Yeah.
just want to be sure that he can get to his own PowerPoint to look at it.
I think it's that one, isn't it?
Yes, but.
No, I think it has several, it has two different, so this is the full screen window and the other is the editing window.
Okay, so he's in the slot, okay. Okay, that's what they'll do.
No, it doesn't
No.
work. You have to do it on the full screen window. No, not on the Zoom. This one,
But
is it? No. Which one is the shared window? That's the question. And I think
should be
I
the
still
shared
have
window.
I still have the first presentation slide on.
okay,
But then the speaker doesn't see his own slides. Is that how it's intended?
okay.
Yeah. No, the speaker needs to see his slides here. Yeah.
I've done that. And I don't normally have.
Maybe you're right and you need to activate Zoom. I think that's what I saw. Yes,
It's
isn't
not
it?
acting the same way it normally does
Yeah,
for me.
yes, I see.
Okay, wait.
Can you? Yes, maybe double click this again. No.
Why am I having problems?
Yeah, that's exactly
That's
what
because you're-
happened all the time.
It's because everybody, I see people. Nope.
There's only one speaker, so can you try to
I'm not seeing.
press
it.
press Alt Tab is to change the active
View.
application.
Mhm.
No. No, may I give it a
Yeah,
try?
please,
Okay.
Please do it. 'Cause I'm not
Because
having-
the Alt tab it switches so we can, but they are all not getting active. So this works with the PDF.
Okay,
So this is meeting controls.
why are
We
the?
don't see the meeting
We're not
controls.
seeing the
That's,
meeting controls.
I think that was something.
That's the problem.
So,
We should be able to see them.
no, that's
No,
not
that's not
what we
there.
want. So if we see that, we can- no. there
Return
should
to
be-
meeting. No,
No,
no.
but it's recording and it says here. Available. This is only the user information. Meetings. Is that what recurring meeting? No.
Oh, yes.
Can you make the Zoom? Pablo already shared the meeting and started the meeting and recorded
But
the
we're
meeting,
not
but
being
we're
able
not
to
they're
get the
getting it on the
controls back.
screen.
Oh, you're doing the PDF.
That's why.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you do a PDF, we could just do screen cloning instead,
Okay,
but then you will not see any notes.
okay,
The
right. The PowerPoint, I just picked.
So the user still sees the PDF.
yeah, they will. They only see that screen.
Yes,
That's
the speaker needs to see his notes on that screen.
So what presentation is running right now? Is it
Right now, it's the one on the far right.
okay?
Feeling so incompetent.
Pablo told us to do stop sharing.
Well, here's your notes, right?
Okay, well, how did?
This is
So
what you
this
wanted.
one is shared, so it's a PowerPoint.
Yeah, you have too many PowerPoints open. That's confusing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So the idea is that the speaker sees this with the next slides and maybe notes. And how can we stop the sharing this presentation? Because the Zoom controls are not
no,
visible.
you should never stop the screen share here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Unless you have remote presenters.
Right, which I will have too.
Okay, you need to promote those guys as a co-host.
Right,
Have you done that?
I've done it before.
Good.
I haven't done it yet.
Yes, okay.
But then again, oh, there's my bar.
Yeah,
Find
that's-
my bar.
So now we have mirror display. So
Okay,
when you start this one, in presentation mode, it should extend,
okay.
and you should have that one.
Okay.
And that should be the one going out.
I may be calling on you.
Now people are seeing the
The same
presenters
presentation mode.
view.
Damn, it's same error we had before.
Yeah,
Okay, so we need to. Damn it. Sorry about this.
Oh, no, I'm thankful that
Oh, there we
it's
go.
not just me.
There we go.
That one's
No,
different, 'cause that is,
now you're stopping it.
Yeah, no. No,
right.
I think Pablo told us to share the exact presentation
have to
application and not the whole desktop.
let's see, which one is that? It's,
There's too many of them going. That is the,
Screen 2 is right, because that's the presenting, that is being
Okay.
shared to the users.
right.
okay, we do the screen 2 now.
And
Yeah.
now the speaker has this view and people see this.
Yeah,
So
so
that's-
you might
that's
have to
perfect.
do the share button and switch to screen 2 if you switch
Yeah,
presentations.
Yeah.
Yep. So-
Okay, I think,
Can we do?
but
it
how did you
together?
manage to get the Zoom bar again?
The Zoom bar.
Yeah, because we had lost.
That
Oh.
was what I didn't.
It could wander to that screen in some cases, so you have to hover over this green bar and then it should actually get that
Come
one.
back.
Yeah.
But the green bar was gone too. for
Yeah.
us.
Then you have to alt tab between them.
Okay.
So just to alt tab until you hit the Zoom one.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay,
Hope
we
for the
hope
best.
it works.
okay.
Okay, where are you if we have problems?
Probably should be in these 2 rooms.
Yeah.
but over
Okay.
here. And you're here, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Good luck. Yes.
Yes. Can you turn this on? Hello, I'd like to welcome you to this session, session D3, Data Services of the Future. I am Lora Lennertz, and I'm from the University of Arkansas, which is in the mid-south of the United States. And I'm very happy and very thankful that I'm able to assist with this today. And please bear in mind that they did not do any assessment of my capabilities in saying names or places or even using Whova or Zoom. So bear with us if you can, please. Our first speaker today is Dr. Janine Beacon. She will be presenting from away, not in this room. Dr. Janine Beacon is Senior Metadata and Ontologies Officer at the UK Data Archive at the University of Essex. Her main interests and work involve the archive's metadata profiles, the optimization of the data catalog search and retrieval, and the monolingual Hassett thesaurus. Dr. Beacon is also involved in several CESDA projects, tools and services. For example, the multilingual ELSST thesaurus, the data catalog, and the metadata validator. So I've gone ahead and I'm going to stop my share. Dr. Beacon, I've made you a co-host. Are you able to share? Let me turn. Hello, Dr. Beacon.
Yes, I'm trying to.
Okay.
Bear with me, bear with me. It's going to happen soon. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. You might want to speak up a little bit.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, can you hear me? Okay.
What do I need to do? Let's see. We're not seeing it on our screen. I'm seeing it on mine, but they're not seeing it in the audience. So
Just your screen sharing. So
oh, I'm having lots of people helping me. It's not sharing
The
with
screen two,
Screen
right?
two.
We need to stop this on screen two. But what
I'm
is-
new to IASSIST and I thought I would volunteer for this. And if I failed, I could slink off into the distance and no one would know.
I can stop sharing and
we
try
need
again.
to end this.
Right.
So now we go for another one. Yes, one more. Yes, one moment. So that's what
have
we
it?
want.
We have it. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, I can't see you at all. I just see my two screens and they actually display the same content. So let's put it that way. Well, thank you for the introduction. And I'm sorry about the technical issues, but when I started looking for the main culprit actually behind the most frequent comments concerning an archive's data catalog and everything that's behind it, for example, I rapidly found out that the main culprit is actually human language itself. An excellent example of which is contemporary English. It's indeed all about language. We all are familiar with user experience comments such as, it's hard to find what I'm looking for, when trying to retrieve studies from data catalogs, and issues raised by authors, curators, and data managers. It's very time-consuming to index manually, hard work to transcribe and annotate manually, or to fill out the metadata such as abstracts, topics, or keywords. What actually goes wrong with natural language? And moreover, is there a suite for artificial intelligence tools for natural language processing somewhere out there? And more importantly, should any virtual archive offer such tools to assist the improvement of automatic indexing, transcribing and annotating, search and retrieval? A very good example of an automatic transcription of spontaneous interviews are the subtitles on TV, such as English subtitles for English spoken interviews. I would like to recommend you to check them for your language and discover how much goes wrong and what might cause the errors. I would also like to point out that today's presentation has been published in the first number of IASSIST Quarterly 2021 already. As might be expected, the article contains more descriptions, examples, many screenshots, and references. So, presenting at the conference illustrates the three forms of natural language: spoken, which I'm currently doing, reading the slides, which we are doing together as an instant of speech to text, and body language, which unfortunately will be reduced heavily today, since I'm asked to sit as still as possible. Language can be verbal or non-verbal, oral or written. When investigating the issues that AI and NLP tools have to deal with, the short conclusion is they have to separate and disambiguate, cluster and extend, control and reduce. These actions contradict each other to a large extent indeed. However, the intelligence is to identify when what action has to be done in order to make them complementary. So verbal versus non-verbal, spoken, written, sounds, silence, non-verbal, body language, the symbols is also silent. So actually only spoken language we can hear and the others are silent. So I put a few examples here of silent films, for example, at the early days of cinema. I put in a scene of the kid with Charlie Chaplin. It actually a movie lasts for an hour and not one single sound is heard, not even one glass is breaking. Or you can have the symbol for non-stop. I'm going to do that now, so stop. I do not know how you would transcribe that, but anyway, and the onomatopoeia, a very good example, is actually discover the transcriptions of a baby crying or of a crow, of a rooster. I put in a link to the Wikipedia so you can see actually that the variation across languages is massive. Okay, the main difference between spoken and written language is that spoken language lacks spelling. It doesn't display punctuation, nor difference between uppercase and lowercase. This is an important issue for automatic speech recognition tools. Please try to pronounce your name, starting with a capital letter and then a small letter. It will exactly sound the same. A solution for the letter phonetic punctuation is offered by pianist comedian Victor Borge in the YouTube video Phonetic Punctuation. Please watch the video to hear the sound of a comma, a semicolon, a full stop, or an exclamation mark. And a comma is important indeed, as you can see on the cover of Lennertz's book, for it makes all the difference between life and death, between a nice panda that eats, shoots, and leaves, and a killer panda that eats, shoots, and leaves. Secondly, natural language is the champion of economical reduction, causing a lot of ambiguity. So for example, the homophones from speech to text, suppose you have to transcribe that. Sees, none, agrees, knows. It's up to you which one I said or which one I meant. Then the homographs, so the other way around, from text to speech. Minute, minute, lead, let, object, object, tear, tear. And you even have a combination of the two: arms, ball, spring, duck, watch, and ring, like arms, body parts, or guns, and so on. So as I said, it's very difficult to have tools dealing with all of that. Oops. Wrong button. So the first challenge for linguistic AI tools is to separate and disambiguate. Well, we know all the tokenizers that have to split words. You can see the differences between were not and weren't, that the MT has to be together. You have sentence splitters. I actually challenge you to put in the correct punctuation when I say no, no, I said, I repeat, state please. Of course, the part of speech tag is murder answers, so the plural of answer, or she answers, and so on. Or a syntactic parser for the old card has been sold in Rome. That one actually is a good example of splitting things up and keeping them together. It certainly helps to reduce the ambiguity concerning the different syntactic categories. Now, important for de-identification and anonymization are named entity recognizers. Tools for word sense ambiguation differ between acronyms and between, let's say, normal words. So an example of the first for named entity recognizers is Paris Jackson. Now imagine a comma in between them, and then instead of having a first and second name or family name, you get the names of two geographical terms, two cities. The Who, as in the singer group, if you want, or the pop group, and the World Health Organization, and so on. Now, I already said that there is a lot of homonyms and polysemes. It seems that for English, it's about 40% of all the words or the expressions. So imagine social and its meaning in socialism and social media. It's really not the same. And when you look into social science research, Gus is really growing up in Scotland and not my friend Gus. And WAS stands for Wealth and Asset Survey, and not for the verb was, which appears quite often in the abstract of a study. These are important issues when developing search tools for data catalogs, for example. And certainly, due to its recent frequency, the last example is all about things having the color black. Dr. Black received black money to recreate the Black Death using black widows. Everything went black then. The second challenge is actually cluster group and extend. So we want to keep things together and make the set bigger. So for spell checker, we want to keep together labor in the different spellings, alternative spellings. Lemmatizers actually keep together text, taxes, taxation, but do not include taxis. Catch chord is another example of that one. Then you have, of course, the synonym rings, which actually share the same core meaning, which should be kept together, like pound, quid, sterling, roll, mola, root, and dosh, all terms or words, if you want, for the English pound. Next to that one, or more than that one, we also have the multi-word expressions which want to keep together, such as barking up the wrong tree, because the meaning of the whole is not the sum of the separate elements, having a ball, or co-referencing, which is also important for the identification, is one already arrived, the presidential candidate, her son, or Jamaica's my home Jamrock, Armiyadi. Challenge is concerns, of course, control and reduce. So instead of extending and keeping together, you actually want to reduce a lot of things. And the first one that you want to do is when you have a search, for example, in a data catalog, you want to remove as many stop words as possible from a search or a query indeed. So at UK Data Archive, you use a set of 160 plus words that actually are not taken into account when searching for when word searching actually. And then another one is, of course, what actually is very important is the keywords. The keywords that identify an abstract or whatever, or a study or whatever it is. And these are very useful tools, and there are a number of them online for free. So what I did was I just took a section of the about text of the data archive, and I used a free online keyword extractor, and these are the keywords that came up with it. And of course, you also have for auto summarizers, and they're also free online. And the text, the previous text, the previous slide contains the text that I used a e-summarizer online for, and this is actually what came up with it. I think that this gives a good impression of the fact that a number of NLP and artificial intelligence tools are out there already. But nevertheless, we see that we still have to, perhaps for a number of months or perhaps a number of years, we still have to shout out very loudly, AI, we certainly need you. Thank you. I stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you very much, Jeannine. We will be skipping questions until the end of the session since we got a little late start today. So thank you very much.
I just stopped sharing.
Okay. I'll go ahead and announce the next speaker. Our next speaker will be Dr. Vanessa Higgins. Dr. Vanessa Higgins is the Director of User Support and Training at the UK Data Service, based at the University of Manchester. She has a passion for data literacy training, having spent the last 20 years in this field. Before joining the UK Data Service, she worked at the Office for National Statistics, ONS, as a survey researcher on large-scale government surveys. So please welcome her as she gives her presentation, Changes, the Future of Data Skills Training with Data Services. They didn't test me for singing either. You can do. Where are you? On the left? There. And you're seeing that. Yes, you just go down to the bottom there. Easier said than done. Okay.
Lovely, thank you very much. I'm not going to sing, you'll be pleased to hear, because I've got a dreadful singing voice. So. Okay, so yeah, I'm Vanessa and I work at the UK Data Service. So I'm afraid.
Your notes and not your.
Oh,
Just,
okay.
I will try to change the.
I don't think I've
the
got many, I
display.
don't think I've got any notes through them.
'Cause
Yeah, well, we do that.
I'm sorry.
You'll have to forgive me because this is the first in-person presentation I've had in the last few years, and since then I've got reading glasses, so I'm going to have to be taking them on and off because I can't see anybody with them on. So if you find me going like this at you, I'm not really grumpy, honestly. It's fine up there.
Yes, and now we are sharing, I hope, the right one. Yeah, that's fine now. So sorry for that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, so in this talk, I'm going to give a whirlwind talk because I think I've got 15 minutes. I'm going to give an overview of the current UK Data Service training programme, my thoughts on future directions, which actually have a lot of synergies with Emma Gordon's thoughts this morning, which is interesting. And I'm going to be basing these thoughts on user feedback and analytics that we get from our hits on web resources and things like that, and also a review of the wider data landscape. Okay, let's try clicking the mouse.
The arrows work now.
They work now. Great, thanks. Okay, so those who don't know, the UK Data Service is funded by the UK Economic and Social Research Council, with the largest repository of social science research data within the UK. We provide access to a really wide range of data. I've not listed everything on the slide, but things like survey microdata, UK census data, longitudinal data, and some international data as well. And we also provide, as well as access, we provide a lot of training and online learning, which is what I'm going to be talking about. That works. Okay, so I've tried to summarize the training program because we do a lot. It is vast. We aim to build capacity in 3 core topic areas. So the 3 top areas in the dark pink there, research data management, which I know most of you are familiar with. So data management planning, anonymization, legal and ethics. Also, finding and accessing data is a big part of our training program. So data discovery, looking at access frameworks, licensing, etc. And that includes our mandatory safe researcher training, which is for a very small proportion of our data, but really important because you cannot access the data without having done that training. So this is the data within the secure lab, the really secure data that we hold. And finally, probably the biggest part of our training is around using data. And this is very much about getting started with using data. So what we don't do is advanced statistical analysis training or advanced statistical coding training, because that is done by other investments within the UK. So what we do is we teach people how to, they've got the data set, they look at the data set, is it suitable for your research? Does it have the right variables? What's the documentation like? Do you need to have weight? So preparing data, data handling, how to link together the person and household files, that kind of thing. So we do this really basic level of training that's really needed in order to get started with these complex data sets. And we go up to around about exploratory data analysis. We do have a few training events and resources that go beyond that, but not really. Most of our resources are not based on more advanced analyses. And there's a whole list there that I'm not going to go into because I don't have time. Okay, so like I said, our training program is vast. So in the last 2 years, we've run 228 training events, which is whopping. We've reached 12,623, everyone is important, attendees in the last 2 years. And actually, that's only 50% of the people who register, because we do get 50% dropout. So, you know, it's a really vast training program. And we run a range of formats that you're probably all familiar with: workshops, webinars, conferences, drop-in sessions. We also have online training materials. So we have this learning hub on the website with static resources, plus videos, plus interactive data skills modules, which are, I did a talk on them last year at IASSIST actually, which are 2-hour modules where the learner goes and builds incremental skills and gets hands-on with the data. And they're all free of charge and they're open to anyone. So again, I'm not going to talk to everything on this slide. So we've undergone a lot of recent changes in the last 2 or 3 years, largely due to the pandemic, but also other changes as well, which are not due to the pandemic. So as everybody's done this as well, you'll all know that we've changed to wholly online training sessions. Particular success has been things like our online safe researcher training, which is this mandatory training that I mentioned earlier. And there was a lot of resistance to turning that from an in-person all-day training session to a shorter online training session, still live, but online. And actually it's worked really well. And the pass rates are still as high as they were in the in-person workshops, and the evaluations are still excellent. So, you know, it's actually made us a little bit more agile, the pandemic. And on things like online workshops with practical sessions, we'd only ever run one of those. The month before the pandemic, we were experimenting, so we were quite lucky that we were doing that. And then we had to quickly convert all our training sessions, all our training workshops to online. So that has increased our attendance hugely. So that's been a real success. So other things that we're doing are, we've experimented hugely with technology, and I'm not going to go into all of those. I actually don't know what some of them are because I don't train with them, but some have been huge successes and some have been flops, and we just quickly get rid of them. So I think you just have to learn to be a bit more agile. Oops, there's a delay, sorry. Okay, so future directions. I'm going to talk about, I've got 6 slides for each of these topic areas, so I won't dwell on that slide. So this was a phrase that I heard in an external advisory board that I sit on from a long-standing user of the UK Data Service in her research and in her teaching. She's a professor in the UK. And she said that the training programme provides the nuts and bolts of data skills that are essential for beginners. And I think that really sums up what we do really well. So I thought it was a nice phrase for this presentation. The wider data landscape outlines the need for these basic and core skills, these nuts and bolts skills, and our feedback shows that they're really in high demand. So when we ran the Data for Dissertations webinar a couple of years ago, we had 462 people at that online, which is huge. And data management basics, we had 183. So, and we get really a lot of hits on our YouTube channels and for our interactive data skills modules, as you can see there. So I think when we're talking about changes, we also have to acknowledge what we don't need to change and what we do really well. So that is my first point, that we need to keep training these nuts and bolts of data skills because they're essential for absolute beginners. Next area that we've been really developing in the last couple of years particularly is computational social science. So things like working with Twitter data, you all know what this is, data pre-processing, basic webinars on how to become a computational social science. So this is a really cutting edge area. Again, the wider data landscape outlines the need for these skills. And these are really, really well received and really high demand. So for instance, we ran a workshop on web scraping with Google Chrome, which was the most well-attended UKDS event in the past year. So the previous one that I said had 400 was the most well-attended the previous year. So that had 310 attendees, and that's the beauty of having them online. And these are successful because they're at a really basic level. There's no charge. Attendees can just come along and ask those questions that they might not be able to ask at other more formal courses where they need a higher level of knowledge. So they can just dip the toes in the water. And I think that's what the feedback we've had is that this is really important for them. So number 3 is blending the old and the new. When I'm talking about old and new, I'm talking about conventional social science. So things like your survey and your census research, and computational social science and the data and methods and tools that go alongside both of those types of research. And so I'm not going to talk to all of these either, but some of the examples Emma has kind of touched on in her keynote. So example 1 is linked survey and administrative data. So we do have some linked survey and administrative data in our collection, but they're under secure access setting. So as Emma said, what we'd like to see is create these synthetic teaching data sets so that we can use these in training. And I'm not going to go into depth about that because Emma did. Another exciting development is linking either longitudinal or survey data with open digital data. And we're currently developing this data linkage and subsetting tool, which will allow users to get derived data products. So the pilot that we've got is using longitudinal data, a big longitudinal data set in the UK, and linking with open source ordnance survey data on green space. And we can create, the beauty of this is that we can create open access teaching data sets, because if we get agreement from the data depositors to use small subsets of the longitudinal data, linked data that's already open, then we don't have a problem with creating easily accessible open teaching data sets. And Darren, my colleague, who's sat in the audience, is going to be doing a presentation on that tool tomorrow, so go along and see that. Okay, meeting the needs of diverse learners. I think this is really important. So from analyses of our registration and events evaluation data, we can see that 25% of attendees are now from outside of social science. So we see computer scientists, data scientists, public health folks coming to our events now, and also a similar proportion of attendees from outside of higher education. So we get voluntary sector, government and public sector, private sector workers coming to us. And we run, in the last few years, we've run quite a few consultations, excuse me, which have shown really diverse needs across the sectors, but also within these sectors. And I've put some of the consultations that we've run up there, and you can talk to me more about these afterwards if you need, but things like the voluntary sector. So we're talking to that sector in depth, and we're seeing really diverse needs. So you get big charities like Cancer Research UK who have researchers who really know what they're doing, and then you get tiny grassroots community voluntary organizations who have data but don't know what to do with it. And so they have very little time, they need tailored courses, which is completely different to most of the rest of the community. And within higher education, we had a survey and some qualitative interviews with higher education lecturers last year, and we have seen a fork in the road in terms of teaching around software and coding. So some people really want to teach with R and Python, others want to teach with SPSS. Some people love teaching coding, other people think it distracts the students from the theory and from getting into the passion of data. So there are really strong arguments for both sides. So we need to make sure that we deal with both of these. And then we also have noticed the importance of asynchronous learning for these sectors as well. So most of our online materials are standalone resources rather than linked together. So Sarah's presentation on Wednesday, which will be available on the website afterwards, talked about the data skills pathways feasibility study. So what we'd really like to do is very ambitious project is link together all these materials that we've got, provide new materials where there's gaps to create these exciting pathways which move people from basic to more advanced skills. So we're doing that at the moment. We're developing pilot pathways, user testing it in the autumn, and hopefully we're going to be using some fancy e-learning tech, which is yet to be decided, for features such as recommended pathways, saving courses, discussion boards, and so on. And I think there's real potential to collaborate with other data training providers on this. And that brings me to my final slide before the conclusion, which is about the complex UK data infrastructure landscape. So you see all those logos there. Those are all the ESRC funded data infrastructure organisations who provide training, and I may have even missed some because they seem to be popping up all over the place. They mostly operate training independently. There's diverse topics, data, methods. They're all funded, different funding cycles, funded to do different things. On the whole, we don't duplicate, but it is quite a messy landscape for the user. So we meet as a network every 3 months for signposting and collaboration, but there's much more potential for collaboration on things like the data skills pathway. And the triangle that Emma showed on the previous presentation at the keynote, I, along with many others in these organisations, were involved in the planning of that triangle. So we need to make sure that we're all talking to each other and learning from each other. Okay, so that's me. So I think the first two top bullets are really for everybody in the data service training world. So there've been many recent changes in terms of formats, tech, etc. And it's important to look within at the user feedback and also outside at the wider landscape. And I won't list the 6 future directions there. What I have done is added one in grey, which I'm hoping you can see, which is technology, which I've not covered. And I think we need to use tech wisely. There's a plethora of tech out there. And I think we need to remember what we're trying to do. The core mission and the core principles with training is to enable robust research and teaching. So we need to remember that rather than just picking up tech left, right, and centre and just using it selectively. Thanks. You can probably sit down.
While my colleague Wolfgang is going ahead and helping with the software right away, I'll go ahead and introduce the next speaker. Her name is Rahel Haymoz, and she is she has studied education and psychology in Zurich, and then worked for a few years as project manager at a large funding foundation in Zurich. And now she works at the Institute for Information Science at the University of Applied Sciences of the Grison since 2020. She's very busy. Additionally, she is a PhD student at the University of Zurich. So let's please welcome Rahel. Sit there. He's the match. Yeah.
So, hello everyone. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be able to speak on this stand I'm working for at the University of Applied Science. Yes. Check my speed. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's the Educational Observatory, short VO. And I will present the key points of the project. And now let me start by briefly giving you a short overview about the educational data in Switzerland. So we have a so-called education monitoring. And the main question is about the relationship for research, of research to education and monitoring of education in Switzerland. On the one hand, we have the education policy and education planning, which includes the evaluation of the education report, the conclusions for the further development of the education system, and the educational policy goals. And the education monitoring also formulates new questions for the education report. And on the other hand, we have research for education and statistical data regarding educational facts about learners, teachers, educational institutions, and so on. All the information results in this education report, which is published every 4 years. WIO, the project, defines itself as an infrastructure project with the aim of continuous improvement of the educational data situation in Switzerland. Now, let's take a short look at the educational data landscape in Switzerland. Well, we have a lot of data all around the country. We have research data, we have registry data, we have competence tests, for example, PISA. As you all know, we have survey, we have learning software, data from learning software, social media data, and so on. And we have, of course, longitudinal studies, and we have data from external school evaluations and individual site assessment. With this database, one can ask the following questions. Well, how do we achieve good education in Switzerland? What is a well-educated citizen? And what is the actual level of education in our society? But what's the issue around these questions? The issue is that most of the data is not linked and not integrated, but fragmented. And to obtain satisfactory answers, it would be necessary to be able to make better use of the potential of the data sources that already exist. And the problem is that the data currently is not sufficiently networked and linked. And as a conclusion, the landscape is fragmented. We think that we need a faster access to data, moving away from traditional survey cycles to new approaches. And now let's take a closer look at the function of VIO. On the left side, we have data science, which provides IT specialists with methodological competencies as well as competencies in data linkage. And on the other side, we have the educational scientists with a focus on research and specific research questions. VIO acts as a mediator, which provides kind of a service hub in the context of data linkage, open data sources and visualizations of educational data, which shows best practices based on case studies. The overall goal of VIO is to use existing and future education data to expand knowledge about the education system in Switzerland. That means data for research and knowledge for monitoring. Now, how is the project financed? The project is financed by the Swiss National Science Foundation within the framework of the National Research Program. The program has a duration of 4 years. It started in 2020 and will last until the end of 2024. And the funding amount is approximately 800,000 Swiss francs. Overall, it is about bringing together competencies from data science and educational science. I will now briefly present the core activities of VIO. And now let me start with the core activities that concerns research and linkage. The objective is to link research data and documentation or make it linkage ready, based on the needs of researchers. It is hard for an infrastructure project like VIO to gain access to research data because there's a lot of improvement by some boards that is needed. And therefore, it is necessary to establish cooperation with data providers, such as the Federal Statistical Office or FORCE, which is the biggest repository in Switzerland for educational research data. Record linkage is not a technical challenge, but an organizational and a legal one. VIO can give general hints and proposals, like proposing data structure definitions that are ready for linkage. Our partners are single researchers, such as PhD students or the PhD candidates and research teams, as well as, I just told you, data providers. The use cases concerning linking social media data with survey and administrative data, and linking data from school administrations to data from educational software. The overall goal of these core activities is to create a manual for linking data on education in Switzerland. As a next field of core activities, we map educational data, speaking of open research data, but also beyond that. We do this in cooperation with Switch. Switch is a foundation and a partner for common digitalization concerns of the education, research, and innovation community in Switzerland. The goal here is to collect open data and data documentation on the internet and make it visible. VIO takes care of the collection of educational data. A lot of data for educational research is somehow sensitive, as we all know, and therefore not easy to access. At the same time, data documentation and open research data is freely available. In many cases, those documentations and ORD sources are needed anyway before accessing sensitive data. VIO will help to make those sources visible, interconnect them in a meaningful way, and enrich them. Partners are, again, Switch and FORCE, as well as RDN in Switzerland. And the use cases concerned to collect and harmonize open educational government data for education monitoring, in asking what's the added value of it, and in collecting and harmonizing open source research data for educational researchers, in questioning what new insights can we gain with that. And the last field of core activities is concerning a prototype of a dashboard on educational data sources. It's about programming an interactive user-friendly dashboard with a map as a main diagram on a basis of data sources in Switzerland. The goal is an interactive visualization of the Swiss education data landscape. What are the advantages of that? The advantages are that it gives you a good overview. It's an appealing design. That's what I think. The details are in the information board, so you also get detailed information. And Switzerland research activities can be quickly and uniformly recorded. The limitations are that this prototype is based on a static, the data is based on a static table, and that there can be no claim to completeness of data. And there can be multiple responses from studies conducted in several cantons in Switzerland. Now, what we think would be interesting for further research, or what we want to know is to gain knowledge about the current status in other countries regarding ownership, access, data protection, and linkage of different data sources, especially in the field of educational data. And it would be interesting to gain knowledge about how especially educational research data is generally handled in other countries and how it's made available to whom. Among other things, we are planning a paper to contrast different solutions in different countries. And moreover, we are planning a special issue regarding the overall project. So I was short. I'm at the end. Thank you very much. And maybe we can discuss these questions at business lunch or in the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. We'll do the same kind of thing. I'm not going to move the mic, so I'll just speak over your shoulder. I'm afraid that might have caused some of the issues before. I'm not sure. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is David Schiller. Some information about him. He was educated as a wholesaler, studied sociology and history, but worked mainly in IT. He worked at the National Educational Panel Study, NEPSD, in Germany, at the Research Data Center of the German Federal Employment Agency, and at the GESIS. Since 2019, he's Associate Professor for Data Infrastructures at the University of Applied Science of the Grison in Switzerland. We are getting his presentation going. Welcome, David Schiller, with his presentation, Datenräume for the canton of Grison, Eastern Switzerland, discussing the concept. Thank you.
Thank you for introduction. Happy to see you, happy to be at IASSIST again after all those years that we were not able to see each other. Because what I like to tell you today is not existing. It's not a project that's running. It's not an infrastructure that we have in our hometown in Grisons, which is Graubünden in German. It's just an idea. And I'm happy to have all those educated and with long experience people in the room to discuss this idea. So what's the idea of the talk today? It should be short as the first one. And the motivation is the following one. If a society has gone through a digital transformation, which we are all talking about for a long time already, then it means that a society is based on data. Okay, so what happens to the data and the information we can derive from that data? Should this answer what we are doing with the data, where the data is stored, what we are getting out of the data? Should this only be answered by like commercial interests? Or should it be answered on a more broader level? So that's my motivation for this talk in general. And I have some additional motivations. That's of course here about when I talk to the ideas to you. If maybe people have similar ideas or different ideas or find it stupid, they will be interested in discussing that maybe at lunch or this evening or whatever. And the last motivation was to show you as much as possible pictures of Graubünden within the next slides. So let's see if this is working. So for the people that have no idea where Switzerland is, it's your fault. So you have to Google that, you have to find it. I will not make a map of the world or of Europe or something like that. Get educated. This is just a map of Switzerland because I'm not asking you to know where Grisons, where Graubünden is. It's on the eastern side of Switzerland. And the first two pictures are already there. So you have seen the pictures? Yeah, good, can go on. This region, this canton itself, is also divided in different language regions, for example. So we have 3 different official languages there. It's the biggest canton of Switzerland if you go from the landmass, but only 200,000 people are living there. If you want to biggest city is Chur with 40,000. It's kind of the center, whatever that means. And if you like to travel from Chur to St. Moritz, for example, you need 2 hours by train because there are all those mountains in the way. So it's just a short distance, but you have to go around them or through them or over them or whatever. The highest pass over the mountains is 2,383 meters between the Prädigau and Engadin, which you can see on the slide there. Maybe it's not the best example, but the pictures are nice. But the question would be how to unite a region like that or any other region maybe when you're focusing on the data idea. It brings us to more pictures and the idea what Datenräume. So it's a little bit German language is also there here. So for you. So Datenräume, I translated not correctly, but in the general meaning with places for data. And so the idea is an infrastructure generally to store, maintain, and to access data in general. But it's not a data center. It's not a computation center or something like that. It's not that in mind, but it has kind of a broader idea in the back. And it's definitely not Amazon Cloud, so or Google Cloud or whatever we have currently in Switzerland, where all the startups and all the other infrastructures put their data in. It's more kind of a place of data for a digitalized society. So for the whole society should be the approach to put data in there and to provide first security, because it's so 2 people from Switzerland, at least from this area. So it's our data. It could be your data as well. So they have to be secure. We want data. Data can be thrown away if we don't use it for insights, if you don't use it for any decisions or things like that. We can use data for services. We can care about data that should be sustainable. So we can have a look at our history as well. And in general, it's about a formed society based on data that's open for the society and can be used for a better future. Huge words in the meantime. But it's the idea. Saw the pictures? The pictures are important. All right, fine. So what could be an idea of Datenräume? That's not my idea. So I have given you the door, you can see it, yes, to the general article about that, which is also implying a little bit of German language for you because it's written in German. But you have DeepL and things like that to translate this. And it means also the picture you see are some German words in there, but we are international anyway, and you can understand it anyway also. This example is put from the mobility area. It's just one example. It could be any other area like culture, like energy, like whatever could be there. And the idea is that you have different layers there. So first are the real objects, the one you can touch that are not digital, but maybe they're connected with more and more sensors that they have, or with, yeah, like sensors, no? Things like that. We are connected to the internet by things like that, not only by a sensor I've implemented somewhere. Then, of course, we have to abstract that to a kind of data layer where those real objects are shown, are represented. And then we have the third layer here where it's kind of a control mechanism to say how things belong to each other, how they're structured, who can access and things like that. If you want to know about this picture and the idea, the link is also in below there, because there's already a society organization that tries to care about that. And then go a little bit to the business plan and that. So we are on the right side here. Is it the right side? Yeah, it's the right. It's the left side. Yeah, we're on the left side, so I don't have to change in my mind here. We produce in data all the time. And the idea is that this data, it has to go to some service provider, and it does. It goes into Google Cloud, it goes to some app, it goes to some insurance company or whatever. Data goes to a service provider. But the additional idea is here that we have kind of a data broker, so somebody who cares about the data that's there and how it is used afterwards. The idea is also that the individuals at the beginning are not blindly and stupidly, as we do, throw the data somewhere into the internet for the people who try to pick it up. But if there's a kind of a decision mechanism in the background to say, okay, nobody uses my data, or somebody uses my data, and maybe I have some benefits from that, like can use a service that runs on my data. You go to the health industry, for example, if I put all my data, everybody puts the data in, maybe we can cure diseases faster. So it's a benefit already. But it could also be a benefit in money. So I'm giving you my data, thanks for the money, do whatever you want. And different regulation mechanisms that could be in there. And what is called a nice German word, Datensenke. I don't know even the word is a German, because Senke is something like a hole. Anyway, but those will be at the end the people that are really using the data, the companies, official, public, private, or whatever, that are using those things. Very general idea of that. And I have to go on to the next slide because of time and because there were no pictures on that slide. I'm very sorry for that. Pictures are coming. Let's go to the main questions that are connected with that. How to run such an infrastructure. Also not my idea, also coming from the paper. There are legal, technical, economical, and ethical issues that come with that. Let's start with a legal one. Is there a legal system in Switzerland, in your country, that would allow to trade data like that? Or is your legal system just uncertain on that area? Or what is the state there? Or do we build not on a legal system, but we need on trust in between each other into institutions or whatever? So what is the goal to go with that? Technically, do we have the technical ability to create such an environment? Because it has to move between security and openness at the same time. We have to secure the data, but at the same time, the idea is it should be used by as much as possible people and interests afterwards. So we have to talk about open standards in that way, and standards at all. And of course, also good access possibilities there. Who's paying for that? Everybody who's running that, the server, there's energy, there's money in between. So who's paying for that? Is this kind of a service I'm guiding in? Is this something that the public has to buy taxes, or what could be the idea to run something? And who decides where the money is going in? So what kind of organizational structures we also have there? And ethical, are we ready for something like that? Is this audience ready? Is IASSIST ready? Was I ready before I started to talk about that? So is there enough talk about open data and usage of data on a kind of a society level? Because when I look back, like the bachelor thesis we have in our university, so if people talk about Datenräume, so spaces for data, they're normally like computational centers, that's like Amazon, that's like a company, and they use their Datenräume for their business. So where are we as a society at that level? You saw the pictures? 3 pictures now, and 2 bears. Because this is the last slide already. So summarizing and maybe discussion at the end or later on, happy to do that. With some questions that I'd just like to throw at you. So how do we move from the society? How do we move the society close? Oh, come on, third try. How do we move data from the society? You get it, or just read it out. So there's society, there's data, move it closer to society. Now I have it. So what private, public, commercial, are there kind of enemies in that field, or should there be cooperation partners to make something living like that, so infrastructure like that? Who should do that? Is it the government? The people who should do that? Companies, because they can do that, they have the knowledge to do that, or libraries and universities, because they should care about all the knowledge and data in the society. No question like that. What are the structures? So we are an international conference here. We are worldwide. I think that's the structure that fits, but it's hard to organize something worldwide. So do we have to have regional structures like a community, like the canton Graubünden, for example, which all those nice pictures are from. And the last, for later on also, have you had any contact to such thoughts going that direction or close to that? Or maybe you have no thoughts now after I talked to you a little bit. So that would be interesting for me. That's why I'm here, because IASSIST is all about networking and talking and meeting nice people. So I'm happy to do that afterwards, because I'm done and have only one last picture for you. There it is. Thanks.
As we get set up for our next speaker, it is a person who needs no introduction because I don't have a large bio. However, please welcome Hervé from the UK Data Archive, as he is speaking on information architecture for secure, trustworthy digital repositories, quality culture, not standards theater.
Ooh, hi, folks. I'm in my favorite position, standing between everyone and lunch. So let's have a go. So that's the current title. The original title in full, was looking more at trustworthy digital repositories, but we've expanded that with some recent work at the UK Data Service. This comes from the perspective of the CESDA Trust Group, as well as the UK Data Service, and a little bit more about that later. This is a work in progress and a journey towards disciplinary, trustworthy, and fair enabling repository and metadata services more broadly. You might have heard of security theatre. We do talk a lot about standards theatre as well, giving the impression of commitment to and compliance with standards and practice, all a bit superficial and presentational rather than practical. So for quality culture, we're looking for something that's really is more service oriented, driven by our missions and goals, effective, efficient, which means that we need to understand the wider context, and we use a phrase at work, which is minimum documentation to some purpose, which is don't write it down unless you need to, but if you need to, write it down. This is about the information architecture, the organizing, the structuring, the labeling, the content, the filing and the finding, the managing data, not about the repository data and metadata itself at the moment, but about the business information, the people, the processes. And this is process driven. It's more process driven than organizationally structure driven, because that is a more stable way of doing things. And this is a little bit broader than traditional information architecture, because we're looking to go beyond the local organizational context and deliver some information infrastructure architecture, understanding the research lifecycle and the wider ecosystem that's in the context. Now, of course, the idealized research lifecycle is that we get to do lots of research, and then we get to go and do lots more research. But unfortunately, we have other annoying things such as outputs, which demand reuse, which need to be fed back into future research. Some of these are physical, but a lot of them are digital, and we're going to focus on those. So once you've got your outputs, your digital objects, the bits, the raw and processed data, but also the papers and publications, the instruments, the software, the code, et cetera, it needs curation. And it needs a curation context, so it can be stored and backed up and everything else. And someone to look after the structure, the file types, the formats and the schemas, the logical and technical stuff, but also someone to look at the conceptual things, the content, the meaning and the understanding. So enter the repository. We deposit, we curate, we get access, we reuse. And this is all very snapshot focused. Is it ready for deposit? Is it ready for access? Is it ready for publication? Is it ready for reuse now? But time passes and things change, including people, processes, and technology. In that orange block there, you've got the question from the Long-Term Data Preservation Task Force about what storage, what curation, and what preservation is on offer. And that preservation has got standards around it, from OAIS through to trustworthy digital repository standards, including the Core Trust Seal. So it's a single core level, low barrier to entry TDR standard, 16 requirements, organizational infrastructure, digital object management, technology, and security. It came out of an RDA group back in 2013, and is now in a situation where it demands active preservation, usability, and understandability by a defined designated community, and is part of the requirements for World Data System regular members, for Clarin B repositories, and for CESDA service providers. There are 160 plus repositories certified at the moment. It's a self-assessment against the core requirements. It gets peer reviewed. The board makes a decision. You get the Core Trust Seal. It's in the process of changing it. Reds to greens at the moment, but generally the next version later this year is going to be pretty stable. It's going to cover roughly the same topics that require roughly the same evidence. Along the middle there, you've got your basic process, your organizational infrastructure, and at the bottom, your technology and security aspects. But repositories contain objects. which brings us rather inevitably to FAIR, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Nice and simple. 15 principles, slightly more complicated. And we don't get to stop there, because there are indicators for those principles which have come out of the Research Data Alliance. There are metrics to measure them that which have come out of projects like FAIR's FAIR. There are tools to measure your objects, things like Fuji. And the report, Turning FAIR into Reality, did say that this context is king, and it recognized Core Trust Seal as an important starting point for standards and processes. So for the rest of this, we've got to keep in mind that this whole principles, indicators, metrics test thing is very much in progress. Yeah, so this is a moving target for everybody. But there's lots of work that's been ongoing. There has been support for achieving Core Trust Seal at the regional level by IASSIST Nordic disciplinary through SHOCK, more generally through things like FAIR's FAIR. And that's also identified that FAIR is a snapshot in time, and that FAIR plus time means that you need someone to do the preservation. And this is ongoing work. There's an emerging network of FAIR trustworthy data repositories. The EOSC Association has got a task force on long-term preservation. There are new projects like FAIR Impact. So this is all very much in progress, and we already have a FAIR to Core Trust Seal mapping to help us work out what you need to do to enable FAIR data. But what all these things have in common is object data, object metadata, the metadata about the processes we use to manage them, and the business information that we need to manage to get all that stuff done. So at this stage, we've got our repositories, and this is from a FAIR ecosystem paper. We've got our repositories and our digital objects and our object evaluation, human machine. And there's lots of attention on the repositories, their practices, their standards, their certification. But there's also recognition that FAIR and trust are both an ongoing journey. We're all at different stages. We're not there yet. But the life cycle and ecosystem are made of lots of other services too. Different functions and services offered by different organizations, quite often through complex data flows and partnerships. So there's one of the 400,000 different options for a research data lifecycle. And there's not all archival long-term digital preservation. There's other stuff happening there. And this is the second of the three increasingly more complicated and horrendous FAIR ecosystem diagrams, which now brings in the repository registries like Re3 Data, the object registries, DataCite, for example, and has this evaluation level at the bottom. We've got our object evaluation through maybe Fuji, repository evaluation through something like Core Trust Seal. But we've got these other services and the software which all come together to deliver this operational layer of infrastructure. So going beyond the repositories, what are we going to do about the service assessment? How do we make sure we're maintaining trustworthiness, fairness, fair enabling and stuff? And there's been some work on this from FAIR's FAIR. It focuses on the technical, fair enabling, quality, being open and connected, and the social, user-centric, transparency, longevity, ethical and legal. If you want to apply standards and evaluate and assess compliance, it really needs, and I think this is, it might be a self-assessment, it might be a formal certification. It does depend on meaning what you mean by this service. If you can't identify it, you can't really assess it in any meaningful way. So I'm from the UK Data Archive. We're based at the University of Essex. We're the lead partner in the UK Data Service. It's a service. We've got a mission. We do reliable long-term access to managed digital resources. We're a service provider to SESTA. And across our vision and mission, we promise to do things. We make available, we assure, we promote, we support, we provide access. We do all these other things which aren't all necessarily just repository focus. So the UK Data Service services are at your service, but it doesn't necessarily help us define those services in practice. So we use the word differently internally: deposit, access services, products and services, technical services. So how do we break this down into the inputs, functions, processes, activities, and workflows that actually define the service so we know what we're analyzing? So back to the Core Trust Seal. We went through this as part of an internal process, mainly technical at the moment, but then more broadly. So if you haven't got long-term preservation, maybe you don't need a preservation plan. And if you're not really worried about offering any curation services, then maybe you don't need reuse. But that leaves us with 14 requirements in Core Trust Seal, which are generally applicable to any deposit, storage, and access system. Anyone that touches your data or your metadata, these are generally applicable. So only these two little orange non-applicables there. The rest of this should all apply to most people across this life cycle and across this ecosystem. And there, rather cruelly, is this last diagram. Once you bring in all of these various elements, it's not fair. It's not fair. So we won't ask you to look at it. We'll simplify it. It brings us to our other decision when we're looking at data services and data service assessment here at the UK Data Service and more broadly across CESDA. So we've got this operational layer of data services, which we're beginning to define, of repositories, software, and objects. But there are certain things which are more simple to manage and better to manage together up in registries. You know, registries are a good thing. They are emerging. So what should we be managing and sharing the management of? And down at the bottom there, you've got the evaluation layer. Do we want to set standards for ourselves? Do we want to set those up for ourselves? Do it all internally? Or are we looking for standard criteria, standards bodies, and assessment methods, which are from elsewhere? So this is broadly where we are at the moment. There are probably more questions than answers in this, but we're getting there. So when we get beyond the core of Core Trust Seal, it is just intended to be core. And when we look at beyond the Core Trust Seal, well, beyond the core, we do secure access to data. So in terms of sensitive data handling and information security, we're ISO 27001 certified. Yeah, filling in a like R16 of the Core Trust Seal is not sufficient for our purposes. We need to go beyond that. And the other thing that we do is we do development and research management and projects and everything else. So we're looking at expanding ourselves to more formalized IT service management, fits them in this case. So that we do need to go beyond that core. And your needs might differ based on your technology or your services or your discipline or whatever it might be. But also beyond the Core Trust Seal, we've got things like access, which is strongly implied by Core Trust Seal, but not specific. We think that it's very difficult to maintain a relationship without offering support to those users. That's not in Core Trust Seal, and that's obviously associated with our ability to train, as you've heard earlier. But also we do something that's outside of Core Trust Seal called mediating use. We offer secure access and safe rooms. So those are additional service components for us. And maybe at the top there, you've got the indicators and the monitoring, the KPIs, the awareness, making data-driven decisions, delivering impact and all that sort of thing. That's also a key part of how we not only deliver that service, but how we improve that service. And below it all, possibly, we've got this policy to procedure framework. How do we put all this together? How do we manage this stuff on a day-to-day basis? Not just our digital object workflows, but our overall systems that bring this together, which also, in Core Trust Seal, are your evidence to say that you do what you do. So we've got this fair assessment. We know that there's a way of assessing our objects. We've worked out that Core Trust Seal is pretty applicable to our repository and our wider data services. We know that we're looking at transparency, efficiency, and interoperability through shared registries and shared standards, that we need to go a bit beyond that core in certain circumstances for our needs, and that there are some things beyond the Core Trust Seal that our service delivers which aren't covered there. It is, as I said, a work in progress. So looking at the next stages for this, our to-do list is, what do we need to respond to changes, to predict the future, to prepare future services? These are all part of our service offering. We need to formalize what we need to do in terms of describing our technical watch, our community watch and engagement, how we think about and understand the wider landscape of repositories and data services. How do we monitor all that efficiently? And we need to be as transparent as possible. There is a cost to transparency, and we need to make sure we deliver the expertise that lies behind all of this. And the other point, which I think is probably one of the more serious ones, is, yeah, how do we make sure we've got shared resources and responsibilities to ensure that best practice? You know, that really does depend on exemplar metadata registries and the emerging standards and assessment. I have to trust them if my users are going to trust me. So that's a transitive thing. So this is all about, in addition to researchers, we are services offering services to services. So on that, my final pre-lunch note, we're still on a journey to agreeing on those functions and processes that make up services, but we need them to understand the roles and the costs as well as what we deliver. We need to ensure that there's trust and fair beyond the trustworthy digital repositories. It's a very wide ecosystem. So We want to help define those shared registries, the resources that are there, and help define the shared standards and assessments, which is part of what we're doing here to start that process off, to make sure there's consistency and transparency of practice. And to go back to fair, findable, and accessible have been kind of partially delivered. But if we want interoperable and reusable digital objects, then we depend on interoperable and reusable services, and they need to be cooperating efficiently and at scale. Okay.
Thank you. I do think we have a few minutes for any questions you might have. I'm going to give one microphone to our speakers, one of our speakers, if you don't mind. Are there any questions here in the room?
Oh, hi, I'm Darren Bell, also at the Data Archive. Hervé, do you think that the service, this isn't a planted question, by the way.
I wish it was.
Yeah. Do you think service is one of the most overused words in our lexicon at the moment? And do we actually need to start thinking about having a canonical definition of a service and some service registries?
Okay, so this is IASSIST. So if we want to spend the rest of the day discussing the definition of a term, this is the absolute perfect place to do it, because it's fantastic. But at the same time, yes, there is, I think it's very easy for certain people who are spending other people's money or pretending to offer things which they don't actually offer to talk about service in very general terms. So I think we need to work out exactly where and when we need to drill down on that service definition so that everybody knows what we're talking about, because it's thrown around in very general terms.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Now that we've had the troublemaker ask questions? Any other? Are there any from our online audience? I don't know. No questions online. Any others in this room? Well, thank you. And please help me applaud our speakers and thank our speakers for the great presentations and lovely visuals. Thank you all. Have a nice lunch.